And it's great to have Ian Castleberry playing with us. And, of course, for a Major League Baseball update presented by Happy Hill Restaurant. Ian Castleberry, I hope you're keeping dry.
Yeah, definitely.
Ooh, man, it's crazy.
Stay out of it.
Yeah, no kidding. You and I, right? We're both making that happen. As long as this doesn't go on for the next couple hours, I think I'll be good. We got a ton to get to, buddy. First things first, Ian, shots fired outside of the Padres-Nationals game Saturday in D.C., creating a huge scare. A lot of players are still talking about that the next day, and it's probably something they won't forget for quite some time. But it was basically outside of the ballpark. But folks at that time, they really don't know. But Ian, we've never really come across anything like this now, have we?
You could hear the gunshots on the broadcast if you happen to be watching, or you can see the highlights on social media or YouTube. At the end of the sixth inning, the Nationals were coming off the field, and you could hear, I believe it was 6 gunshots. And yes, this took place outside of the ballpark, a part of Nationals Park where roads and traffic can go by even during a ball game. So hearing the gunshots, of course, the crowd was worried. People were running onto the field, and players were getting off the field. Padres and Nationals were allowing some fans to take shelter in the dugout, to take fan safety into consideration, and to inviting fans into the dugout. I thought was a nice gesture. And in terms of security, yes, this is a huge concern. I mean, if they were that close to the ballpark, firing gunshots, and who's to say they couldn't have run up the gate, armed and bulled their way into the ballpark? Apparently, this had nothing to do with the game or anything. This was apparently a drive-by shooting situation, but it's not too difficult to imagine that something like this could have gone into the ballpark if, actions had taken that direction.
Indeed. And thank goodness no one was hurt. I think 2 people were shot outside, but not that was all that they were not fans at the ball game, but it certainly shook a lot of fans, and can certainly understand that. So let's go to the Yankees Red Sox, that rivalry. Alex Cora pulling Boston Red Sox players off the field Saturday. What was it, like a full moon Saturday night? Just crazy stuff going on. So a Yankees fan throws a baseball at Alex Verdugo, and Ian, this lowlife Yankees fan, intercepted the baseball Verdugo threw to a young Red Sox fan. Those guys, to me, are the lowest of the low. They should be thrown out of the ballpark just for that gesture, you selfish you-know-what. But anyway, he then took aim at Verdugo. Now, we were talking with Chris Womack earlier, and Chris said the guy's got no spine. He says because they were telling him to throw it on the field, to throw it at the player, and he's like, instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to keep the baseball, or in this case, a baseball that wasn't intended for you, but he did it anyway. So now, as Alex Cora pulls his team from the field, now this player or this fan has been banned from every major league ballpark. I don't know how they're going to enforce that, but how did the Yankees react to this pathetic act?
Well, the Yankees, as you said, this fan has been banned from all major league ballparks, but the Yankees first took the step of banning him from Yankee Stadium. Again, I don't know how this sort of thing is enforced. Obviously you have a name if you buy the tickets online or something like that. I mean, does every single ticket taker at a gate across all 30 major league ballparks have a picture of this guy? I've never understood how this was enforced, so hopefully it is. But yeah, Aaron Boone, the Yankees manager, Brian Cashman, the Yankees general manager, spoke in support of what Alex Cora did in pulling his players off the field, apologized to the Red Sox for this fan's actions, and universally derided the actions of this fan, saying it's not representative of Yankee fans, it's not the way people should behave at major league ball games. And you said something, it was a full moon on Saturday night, but it certainly seems that ever since fans have been allowed to go back to sporting events, we saw this early, it's almost like fans forgot how to conduct themselves, or certain fans have forgotten how to conduct themselves at sporting events, and whether it's pent-up aggression or just generally unruly behavior, we're seeing this manifest itself in public.
Yeah, man, it's oy vey. That was just a weird night in Major League Baseball for sure. As Ian Castleberry joins the Wise Guys. Of course, you can follow Ian on Facebook, like The Comeback, and also Awful Announcing, and both websites, thecomeback.com and awfulannouncing.com. Ian does great work for both, and always fortunate to have him here with the Wise Guys. All right, so both Shohei Ohtani and Pete Alonso donating home run derby money. These are great stories, and it seems like this has been a really good week for baseball players to show themselves as human beings and compassionate ones. You mentioned Nats and Padres players letting fans come into the dugout when that shooting was taking place. Well, Ohtani gave his entire $150,000 that he earned at the home run derby to 30 Angels employees, which I'm imagining is like the clubhouse people, those who work around the team, probably don't make a whole lot of money. Alonso donating portions of his winnings, $50,000 each, to 911 first responders and the Wounded Warrior Project. And Ian, do you think this generation of Major League Baseball players are maybe more socially conscious, or do you think these guys are just standouts?
These two might be a special case. I mean, Shohei Ohtani definitely to express gratitude and make that gesture toward Angels employees, as you said, support staff, whether it's clubhouse. I don't think it was any administrative staff or anything like that, but it may have been. And we're talking about 30 employees. I mean, Shohei Ohtani just might be that good a guy. And Pete Alonso, I think, has shown himself to be charitable and very grateful for the support he's gotten from New York fans at the All-Star game or at the Home Run Derby. He had music by New York rappers as his way of kind of tipping his cap to the city that supported him. But I think, especially, we've seen this throughout sports. I think in baseball as well, athletes becoming more socially conscious, advocating for social change and social issues ever since, what we've seen with the George Floyd murder and Black Lives Matter and other. I know baseball players were kind of frustrated that Major League Baseball was a little bit behind the other sports in expressing support for those causes, and maybe the players are trying to make up for that. But I do think players realize now, especially with social media, and they can kind of cut out the middleman with outlets like the Players Tribune and Boardroom, where they can get their message out there without having to do it through the media. And I think athletes are taking it upon themselves. They realize they have a platform, a pedestal to speak out on issues that concern them, and we're seeing more and more of that.
Yeah, the whole shut up and dribble thing, that ain't happening anymore, as it shouldn't. And I think those, on both sides, those who complain about it probably don't agree with that side. And that's how this kind of happens. But I think, this is America. You have every right to speak your mind, whether you're an athlete, professional, or otherwise. You're just a citizen. That's how it works in this country. And it's nice to see more and more athletes stepping up and showing that kind of compassion and care about our society and what's going on in it. More Shohei Ohtani's and Pete Alonso's, please. Ian Castleberry with the Wise Guys. All right, we're staying in the Big Apple despite a vote of confidence from Hal Steinbrenner. The Yankees are not doing very well right now. Ian, do you sense Brett Boone may not make it through the season?
I find it very hard to believe that the Yankees would make a managerial change in season, for the biggest reason being that I don't think there is anyone on staff that is immediately obvious to step into that managerial role. Maybe Phil Nevin, the third base coach, but it's not like they have. He's the closest thing they have to a former manager on staff. Not to say that you need managerial experience to take over, but in season, I think it would be important to have that sort of experience. But there doesn't seem to be any indication. And I think this is what Hal Steinbrenner is alluding to. There doesn't seem to be any indication that Aaron Boone has lost the team or that, players are tuning him out. This is very much an issue of how poorly the Yankees are performing. Is it Aaron Boone's fault that the Yankees are hitting .235 as a team? That guys like Gary Sanchez and DJ LeMahieu are Rougned Odor, Gleyber Torres are hitting far below their usual career numbers. And they're still getting power from Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. The Yankees are still hitting for power, but they're not putting the ball in play very much. They're still pitching well, but their offense is almost entirely the reason that they've fallen as far behind in the standings as they have. They're 48-44, 7 games back now of the Red Sox in the AL East. They are still in the wild card race, 3.5 back there, but they'll still have to jump over the Blue Jays and the Rays if they want to get into the wild card race. I just don't. It doesn't seem that Aaron Boone Now, he could still be fired after the season if the Yankees don't make the playoffs, and falling far below expectations. But at this point, I don't think Hal Steinbrenner sees that firing Aaron Boone would be a catalyst to solving the Yankees' problems to firing him.
All right. Well, that's why we ask you these important questions, putting a little perspective to things. Is Ian Castleberry joining the Wise Guys on the DC Creasman Jewelers Wise Lines, presented by Happy Hill Restaurant? All right, Ian, so the Braves trade for Cubs outfielder Jock Peterson. And Ian, it looks like the Braves, gave up a top prospect, but it's a prospect whose position is probably cursed when you play in the Braves farm system. You like this trade to replenish as much as they can to replace Acuna, who is done for the year?
I do like this trade. Bryce Ball, I think he was blocked essentially. Freddie Freeman, yeah, he's a free agent after the season, but I think everybody believes that Freddie Freeman is going to re-sign. Freeman has given no indication that he wants to test free agency. So I think he was a prospect that the Braves could spare. And they needed outfield help. And Jock Peterson, he's not having a great season. He's batting .230, but 11 home runs. He's kind of a below-average defensive outfielder at this point. But I think unless they make a blockbuster-type deal, Jock Peterson's probably the best they could get under these circumstances. And he will help replace Ronald Acuna's production. And we're sitting here on July 19th, 11 days before the Major League trade deadline. If the Braves fall further out of the race, it's possible that they could end up trading Jock Peterson elsewhere if they decide that they are not in it and they could get something in return from Peterson.
This is going to be, sometimes these trades, it's interesting. Sometimes they work out and the GM like, wow, what a genius. I knew this was going to happen. Or sometimes it just tanks. We'll see. But obviously, I was bringing that question last week, to Stanley, are you concerned? Acuna's done for the year. Are the Braves? And Stan's like, heck no. When you look at that division, and it is true, I think the Braves are 3 or 4, without looking right now, 3 or 4 games out of the lead in the Mets. And I need to swing back around because I forgot to ask you these questions. I'm like, this segment's not supposed to end this. Oh, it's because I forgot a couple of questions. To the Big Apple, we go back to Ian, and Jacob deGrom pulled for tonight's start. It looks like he's going to be on the 10-day IL. How concerning is this considering his recent arm issues?
This is a huge concern for the Mets. deGrom has battled injuries all season. He's already been on the injured list once. But tightness in the right forearm is a big red flag because that is very often a precursor to ligament damage in the elbow and possibly Tommy John surgery. Now, deGrom has had an MRI exam, and they didn't find any structural damage, no tears or anything like that. So the hope is that rest, whatever inflammation or it might have developed there in the right forearm, that settles down and deGrom is able to come back after some time off. But dealing with a guy like deGrom, he's been incredible, but he throws harder than any starting pitcher. He goes out there like a closer. Guys can throw in the ninth inning. They can throw as hard as they want because, they're only in there for one inning. deGrom's going to be in there for 6-7 innings, maybe even more, and he's throwing as hard as these guys coming out of the bullpen. So I think it is a concern, and it's certainly a concern for the Mets pitching staff, to lose their ace. They've already lost Carlos Carrasco, Noah Syndergaard, that what their starting rotation that looked like a strength has fast become very thin as they try to stave off, as you mentioned, the competition in the National League East.
Boy, indeed. And, of course, then the Mets get more interesting news on this Francisco Lindor, who they paid a ton for. He's on the 10-day IL as well with an oblique strain. Probably not as big a concern as Jacob deGrom, but still nothing to sneeze at and an opportunity for the rest of the division, maybe, Ian, to make a bit of a move on the Mets.
Yeah, it's not as big a concern in terms of being able to replace him. The Mets, they have Jonathan Villar. So Lindor can be replaced in the short term. And Lindor, he was really coming on in June and July, but he hasn't had his best season. The concern here, though, is that this is a grade 2 strain of the oblique muscle, so it's a little more serious. It's very possible that Lindor could miss the rest of the regular season, depending on how much damage is in that oblique. There are trade options. If the Mets really wanted to go for it here, they could trade for somebody like Trevor Story or Javier Baez. But I think it's more likely that they're going to make a trade for a starting pitcher to replace deGrom if that's necessary. And there are some names like Jose Berrios from the Twins, Herman Marquez from the Rockies, Max Scherzer from the Nationals, but it's doubtful the Nationals would make that trade in the division like that. So the Mets are in a difficult position here because, yeah, they need a starting pitcher. Maybe they need a shortstop, but they very likely cannot do both, at least on the blockbuster level of a trade.
Man, oh man, we'll see where this one goes. Woo, lot to cover today. As always, that's Ian Castleberry. Hey, my man, always appreciate you. You know that. Keep up the great work, and we thank you so much. We're grateful to have you.
Okay, thanks so much, Pat.
Be well, Ian. It's Ian Castleberry. God, he's a talented guy. Ian's appearance, of course, on the D.C. Creasman Jewelers Wise Lines is presented by our friends, our neighbors, and our partners at Happy Hill Restaurant.